Well, good morning to those of you on the West Coast and good afternoon, excuse me, for those of you coming in from other time zones. Welcome to our webinar today. We're covering AI again. This seems to be a question we're getting all the time. This one is really about hype versus financial outcomes, hard numbers, getting a return on what you're doing with AI. I'm your presenter, Patrick Ciccarelli. I'm the founder of RC Technologies. I've been doing these webinars and other sessions for 3 years now. I'm excited for those who are joining us. Either you've been here before, welcome back. You're an existing customer possibly, or this is your first time attending. You're welcome to all. Please feel free to share this as we continue to produce content onto our customers that are looking for this. Now, first of all, I got into doing the webinars just because my background is in training and teaching, and that's really a passion of mine. I really love to do it. And one of the things that early in my career I learned about was that I was able to take concepts and topics and convert those over to something that was meaningful. A classroom student, a graduate student, or a professional that I was working with. And so I did that for a little while, and then business grew, and there were lots of other distractions. And I've come back here because we're in this within various technology topics. Where, we're introducing technology again here that could really change how we're going to live. Some of the changes they're feeling already. And this is not because of, I don't say that because that's what I've read or because of what I think. This is really coming from our customers and other professionals that we work with. They're coming to us and saying, hey, we've heard about this, or I've used this personally, or I've used this a little bit, and I'm really hoping this can help us. And in my 30-year career, I've not seen many technologies that really comes down to the organization and individual to really help us in a meaningful way. And I would say in the last 10 years, with all the talk about digital transformation, it's really now what we're calling artificial intelligence that it does really seem transformative to me. And most importantly, not only is it transformative, but it's accessible. These are not technologies that require spending enormous sums of money to get access to. So that brings us to our topic today, actually, why this topic, what came up here to prompt me to cover this, because we were going to talk about some topics about using AI in Microsoft 365. We'll get back to those at a later point. But what really triggered me was some of the research that I've been reading recently. And I was surprised to read it. And I think that many of us on today's webinar might learn that we are at an advantage of using this technology to get a financial return, whether it's directly in how we try to grow our income, or if it's related to costs or building future capacity. Like, this is a technology that you can put to work immediately and counter some of this research that I've seen out there. So again, I was really interested to see this research, wanted to know who this research was done on, like where this data came from, because what I'm seeing is I'm starting to see immediate financial returns inside of our company, inside of the clients that we're working with. And I think anyone who takes this information, attends this session, I think what we'll come away with is that you can actually put this to work. This is not technically hard to do from the standpoint of getting a return. So with that, let's jump into some of our topics today, some of our items that we're going to cover, and we'll switch here. And you'll be seeing me today. For those of you who've attended before, I've usually not gone back and forth with video and slides, but today I'm going to be doing that with kind of the format. This is the return on investment. Now, the Harvard Business Review is a publication. It's an independent publication affiliated with Harvard, obviously. But this research actually came out of MIT Sloan, the business school. And they went out and they did this somewhat expansive study asking, this was in 2025, asking organizations if they are seeing value value investment in their AI projects. And I was interested in this here, the project return. So I mean, wow, that blew my mind. Honestly, I was just thinking like, you know, we ventured into this learning, then started like quickly than we thought we would. Now again, our business in IT and cybersecurity, not software development and data science and machine learning, all these other that's not where we started. But we got returned, you know, pretty quickly. And there was one point of this study that I found that was in our video about AI, applicable not just to AI, but across the organization, experimentation track inside of our organization. We've been called pre-AI, where we really made some mistakes and failures and incurred some costs and learned from that mistake. So now we're at that place where like we're now fixing that, and we're now seeing that as we go to apply it to AI. So what should AI deliver for you? And you know, the piece that mostly I hear out there today is that AI should make it easier or just faster. And I think you're probably really cutting yourself short if that's your approach on the time investment in AI and the cost investment, the dollars investment in AI. I think you're probably missing a bigger opportunity there. And again, I'm saying this from firsthand experience that you can actually get some immediate returns and make some evaluations. And we're going to look at a couple examples of that later on a couple of our slides here. But the first one is really thinking about reduced headcount costs. Now, not to alarm anyone out there, I don't think I'm not suggesting that you go and cut your staff by a third because now you're going to use AI to do it. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is if your organization is trying to get more initiatives accomplished, if your organization is trying to grow, you may not have to grow your headcount in the same way at the same rate that you had previously. So that's a really valuable one, is the reduced headcount cost approach to AI. Now, I think this is much harder to do in large organizations. Like it's harder to see that return. Like if you've got a division that's 1,000 people, saving 1 or 2 positions doesn't really have a significant change in what your bottom line might be if that's what you're looking at, if you're looking at profit. But if you're an organization that many of us might be a part of, which you're 20, 30, 50, 100, even 200 people, not having to budget for, you know, instead of 5 headcount, you're going to budget 1 headcount. That's a big difference from a budgeting standpoint. That's a big cost savings if you don't have to hire as quickly as you might have given whatever your objectives are, your strategic objectives. The other one that gets looked over that I think in our service-based business, and this applies to services in any area, be it services, direct services as a nonprofit organization, if you're in healthcare doing direct services to patients and so forth, is the customer experience. And this might feel harder to measure in your organization as you're delivering service, but I think it's a place that's it's a really good investment to do it. This is a place where we look at it, and we're looking about some of the qualitative things that we do. But if I was just to measure how we deliver customer experience and how do we improve on that, our ability to use AI, let's say, to shorten the amount of time it takes, like in terms of exceeding expectations for customers, the quality of the work that we do. We can align our vision for customer experience and then that vision more achievable now with AI. So enhanced customer experience is really important one here. How people do you talk about improving might be whether they're patients with customer, whether you're a for-profit organization and you're bringing on and keeping clients, you want to retain those clients. However you define client or customer, it's always harder to manage and support if that door is a constant revolving door of people coming in and out, like it would be, let's say, in retail, versus you've brought on a customer, you've intake them, you now know them, and you're going to serve them in some way. So client retention and your ability to interact with them, like that's an important part of that, because there's obviously a direct cost to acquire a customer. And then now we're talking about how do we make it so we can lower and reduce that cost of acquisition and the number of times we have to acquire in a given period of time. So same thing that goes when we talk about employee retention as well. We're going to look at some of that in general, but staff retention is another big one. Now, this one is interesting personally to me from a positive psychology standpoint. Some of you have attended webinars in the past, have heard me talk about this. But when you look at the staff retention piece, a lot of what affects staff retention, there can be it's easy to point to compensation, but oftentimes it's that the individual feels that they can really contribute to something, that there's purpose in the work they're doing, and that they're supported in developing and improving how they do their work. Now, if you're someone who, like me, who you've had to manage 12 or 15 people at one time, you understand providing that feedback and guidance is really time consuming. It's hard to do. Like, you need to do it, but you've got a whole bunch of tasks and a whole bunch of people reporting to you. It becomes very difficult to do. So this is one of these benefits. If you think about the cost, the impact, especially as your staffing gets smaller, the impact of adding employees and replacing them and what problems may occur as people learn how things are done. Any of us that have been in organizations long enough, whether you've managed, hired, recruited, onboarded, whatever the case may be, there's this delay in someone learning how to do their role. And then if you're in the services business or in the product business, now that I think about it, like you're potentially looking at impact in your product flow and in your or in your service delivery, and that to hire new people. But you can actually quantify that as well. We could definitely take a look at quantify that. Now, let's go to referral generation. If customer experience is where you started with these technologies, and that customer experience leads to better interactions with the customer or with the client, where they feel they're being served well, then there's a higher likelihood that in some way that your organization is going to get referrals. Now, maybe you're in a line of work that doesn't require referrals to do what you do. Maybe it's about reputation. Maybe it is about your website. If you have a marketing person and they want things that will help that website be easily found online, to be indexed and searched and so forth, all of those things come into that. And now let's take the last one. Now, this one is very strategic. This is I'd probably say the one thing everybody wants to get to is, by using these new technologies, can we get better decision making? And that better decision making usually translates directly downward into, okay, this has improved our income statement, our P&L, profit and loss statement in some way. Like, it's meaningful and strategic in that way, because we can make better decisions. We're better informed. We have better analysis, and we have better output happening, meaning we make a decision, we can make it more timely. And you can potentially imagine how this could apply all over the place within the organization. So again, these are the things that we should be thinking about, so that experimentation doesn't just end up being, and again, one of the purposes for today is that experimentation just isn't, well, I go into Gen AI and it's now a different way to get information. Like, it's a far distance, if that's how it's being used, of how you're going to really create value. And hopefully, again, in here in the next couple of slides, we'll take a look at this and see if we can explore that a little more. So there's this old saying, right? Time equals money. And I want to talk about a little bit about this, because I think in nonprofit organizations, as well as in within for-profit organizations of any kind, sometimes we lose sight of this. And I don't think it's an ugly, kind of an ugly phrase or an ugly thing to attack this problem. In fact, I would say, just thinking about my clients that I've spoken to when I consult, is the CFO types, whether they have that title or they have that fiscal view, they appreciate that we're thinking about this and we're trying to solve problems that could assist in how every dollar is spent. And that's really where my lens comes from. It's if we think about nonprofits, we think about administrative costs. How do we keep administrative costs low relative to the percent of a dollar that goes towards services, to the direct services that are being provided? So this is similar to how business works as well, right? You want to make sure that if, let's say, sales is really strategic and you need to sales operation, you want to make thing and not your really understanding this relationship of like, can we identify time and can we put a dollar time? That's really what we're kind of looking into and discovering. And so nonprofits, it's like, well, I don't know. I hear this a lot, in nonprofit organizations or social good organizations, like, well, I'm not sure what that has to do. I know what the person costs, but I don't know what that task costs us to do. And that's an important question to be able to answer. And this is the approach you might want to think about as we're going through today's presentation. You want to think about, is there something we do, not a job that a person has, but is there something that we do within our organization that is very labor intensive, that is most labor intensive, may or may not cost you the most. Usually it does, but it depends on who's doing that role. So if you have someone who in some situations is making minimum wage, then obviously a 2 or 20-hour task might not be that expensive. If you have someone else doing a 10-hour task and they're an executive and they're costing you $100 an hour, right? Like that's what their true hourly cost is, fully loaded cost. You get a sense of that comparison. But that person that, let's say, is making minimum wage, if you have 10 of those doing tasks and the 10 of them spend 20 hours on the same task, you just have a high volume of it. Now those costs are starting to add up on an annual basis. Add into that potential error rates that would occur, meaning they did the work in 20 hours, but then we had a supervisor has to check everything. And after they checked everything, they have to go back and ask those folks to fix what they did. And you see what I'm getting at. There's a bit of labor debt that occurs where the people are having to go back and redo the work as corrections are made. And you just need a more knowledgeable or skilled person overseeing this group of people to make sure the work is done right. So in this one task, it didn't seem like a big deal, but then when we multiplied out how many times that tasks happen, how many people are involved doing the same tasks across a group of people, and additional supervision for us. Your federal tax deadlines and your submitting tax, like a CPA. You making errors. So if you have, if you're delivering services for, let's say, the state of California, and you have a contract with them, as some of you on this webinar might know, if you get that wrong, they just don't pay your bill. They just say they send it back. And then good luck. Now that you're in this other kind of route, you don't get paid quickly anymore. You have to get it edited. It gets back. There's a review team. You're not part of the normal process anymore. So I've heard horror stories of some organizations, not getting paid for 3 and 4 months. And part of that, some of that time is spent correcting and cleaning up things. And some of that time is just now going back and forth with the funder to get paid. And none of us, whether, no matter where you sit in type of the organization, none of us want to be spending that time justifying getting fairly paid for the work that we're trying to do. Like that's just a very difficult financial situation to be in. And again, we're coming to this issue of time and money. And so we're going to take a look at this in a couple examples we're going to go through. We're going to look at aspects of how we approach this and some anecdotals of some other customers that have looked at and solved some of the same problems. So looking here, if we just jump to our next slide. So email management. So there are still many of us, even if you're using Slack or Teams for internal chat within your organization, there's still many roles and positions that have a very, very heavy requirement around using email. And the more time sensitive that email is, the higher the volume of the email, the more spend on this. And if you've never seen this before, let's say in a software company or a tech startup, you'll hear software engineers who will tell you, and our internal team has the same thing to me. They're like, if you could avoid hate having to manage, and you think, why do you hate email? And the big thing is that it is a time suck. It becomes a place where lots of communication is going back and forth, and they find that a very inefficient use of time. So there's just a general culture of like, hey, using a product like Slack or Teams is much better for back and forth conversation. It's designed for that. There isn't this possible pause or delay where you send an email and you're wondering, when will they get back to me? Because like any of us, this idea that, you want to start working on something, you want to get it solved, you want to answer it and get it off your desk. That's a very efficient way of working. Like you can be highly productive and effective in doing that. So we take a look at email management AI. This is something I hadn't looked at closely just because I moved into chat. I'd seen a dramatic fall off in the amount of email I had. But I was talking with a client and I was saying to this client, for your role, because you're external facing, you're talking to the outside world, outside your organization, how important is email to you? And they're like, email is very, very important to what I do. Like that's mostly how people expect to communicate with me. They're not messaging any other platform. They're not texting me. They're not sending me, messages on Instagram. Like it's email. And when they did that, we talked about the amount of time they saved, and saving just 4 hours a week to them was like, holy cow. I easily spend that much. I spend most every day on email. I could lose half a day because of email, back and forth, answering questions. It would be great if there was a tool that allowed me to reduce the time and also ensure that I'm getting timely responses, because just getting the answers out over and other people's emails that folks manage. So we took the average employee cost within this. This was a pretty low employee cost. Let's just say for the sake of example, it's $46. The amount of savings that this represent over the course of an annual time to this individual was invaluable. Now, if you're a CFO person, you see this example, you might say, hey, wait a minute here. Like that doesn't sound right to me. I don't see any financial return to the company. You're saving this person time. And I would argue that, yes, we are saving them time. And we're not two things. A, people. So that's a problem for many folks. They got a high volume, so we're trying to solve that. The second thing we're trying to do is we're trying to create more capacity in the staff that we currently have, and this represents a 10%. Now, if I take this, $5 an hour, if I take this 184 in weekly savings, if I take that in the monthly year, it's like $700 and some dollars of savings. I take that almost $8,000 or $9,000 annually versus the 40. But I might find this is a use of dollars. Communication standpoint, $200 a month. It's one of the best out there. I have done research on the it does plug into your inbox. So if you're an individual that's dealing with but for healthcare, you can in your email, whether you do that now or you used to do or someone did, you might not want to consider using an AI tool. So again, always want to think about privacy and any kind of state or federal compliance, governmental compliance you might have. So you want to take that into consideration here. So let's move on. Let's look at another example here. So this is us, this is our company, and we had in our budget for a better part of must have been a year. We were trying to figure out how to improve our metrics, and so in trying to improve our metrics, one of the things that we do in IT is we get people sending in requests, and we have to triage, figure out what to do with them. And in call service desk, it's very common that you have a initial tier of folks that maybe the customer knows that position exists. Should I route this question to really tier one somewhere else? So we'll it's like an internal, but when you're in the hundreds or thousands, or sorry, when you're in the hundreds, relevant triage. Now, is there a way to use AI to automate this role at what it would cost to hire 2 people, say minimum technology that we would get in customer experience? So hire people, I mean 2, not 1. The reason being is in order to meet our numbers, we can't ever have anyone out sick. So it becomes very difficult to consider you just can't run that risk. 8 hours late, like so we also have some coverage that we need. So there was no way to get around. Just to be able to provide traditional, like quote unquote 9 to 5 service, we would need 2 people, and approximately that cost was $60,000. That would be it. And so we just kept hesitating that return because it was a big expense in order to go from 15 minutes in triage time to a much lower number. And the question in doing it this way with hiring people would be, there's no guarantee that 15 minutes would become 1 minute. Maybe it becomes 5 minutes. Maybe we go from 15 to 10, and then a year later we're 10 to 9, or whatever the case may be. And then there were all these other post-triage tasks that would need to be done, like, is the ticket marked correctly? Did the triage person know how to do that? Like all this complexity. So we ran a pilot where we wanted to see, could we write our own code? So this is our software lead, Taylor, who's internal with us, our own staff. Can we build a service integrated with our tools? We didn't want to have to go buy new tools. Integrated with our tools to look at this where we had complete control over what was being asked, the data that was going through. We didn't want this out in the public space anyway. We wanted to be this very private and confidential. And you can see the return here on this really clearly, which is we couldn't meet this need in terms of the budget expenditure. This would have happened maybe in 2026. And again, not confident about it. If we were trying to run a 24/7 operation, which more and more of our customers are asking for extended hours, or as we get larger, our customers get larger, they need more service coverage, we would have had to hire 6 people. That's where the 187,000 comes. It means in order to cover 7 days a week over all 3 schedules, middle of the night, daytime, late evening, what have you, you need about minimum of 6 people to get that kind of coverage to work. So that's the lowest you can do it in headcount. So potentially we're talking about long-term as much as $187,000. And in the end, it took us a lot of wrangling to figure it out and the details, and we're still modifying it as we use it today. We were able to do this for about $15,000. Now that's not where we started. We didn't spend that much going out of the gate, but just, our return on this was in 3 months. But here's the big return. It's not in that, it's actually in the customer experience. We shaved off from 15 minutes to 1 minute in the triage process. And it's very elementary right now in how effective it is. Like, we're not asking it to do very complex selections yet, but it is easily capable to that. So think about that cost return, 3-month cost return, if not less, but it works. It gives us a guaranteed SLA. It's operating 24/7, so we know what's happening 24/7. It's also, when we did this, we made it so that the triage service, this AI, actually set the ticket with all the correct settings. So by the time the staff person who's going to respond to the customer, by the time they got the ticket, all of the fields were filled out. And this is one of the most painful part of being in a ticketing system is you want to capture data, but the more data you want to capture, that means the more work for the technician, means they're not helping people. They're filling out a form. But we use the AI service to do that. And these are the types of savings that we're looking for. Like, we weren't initially trying to eliminate a position. We just need this, in value to our organization and to our customers. We started out a project that started, it was a 4-week long project. Very, very small, tiny project, 4 weeks. And so it's small, and see how hard it would be to do. And then we started down that road. Make this service work and see how effective it is. And something we'll continue to invest in. I could easily see $10,000 a year. We can creating new logic and branding off. Again, not necessarily about somehow making it a much better, a faster speed service. It's not going to be any faster than it already is, but can we improve the experience for the customer in this and allow our staff to be even more effective in the work that they do for our customers? So again, a really important way to look at a particular problem and say, hey, how could this be done to solve it? If I had said, I have this idea, why don't we use AI? People are like, we're busy, we don't have time for this. But when we said, how else could we solve this problem? Here's what it's doing to our metrics. Is there a better way to do this? This is an example where buying it off the shelf made no sense whatsoever. It really made more sense for us to build this and do it customized. And again, for those of you, I don't know anything about software, I only understood the dollar amounts in this webinar. I would say to you, there's not a lot that you need to know about AI. All you have to ask the question is this step? It takes a lot of system. Another example that I can talk about in a little bit as well. Maybe there's someone else in your organization, it's like we need AI, a board member, an executive, another manager, someone who's very technically inclined, and they're really excited about ChatGPT. It's important to know that once you move from the individual level and you're trying to do projects in the organization, AI projects do fail. And that's where some of this research, most recently from MIT, but other research in 2024 and 2023 that I've read has talked about, and again, a lot of these coming from some of the leading academic institutions. So this isn't trade talk. This is academia looking at this and evaluating the real world as well as their own data sets to say, like, what's going on with AI. And for those that maybe you haven't heard this before, you haven't attended one of my AI webinars, but one of the things that we see happening is the industry, academia is catching up with industry in terms of applying AI. So it happened very, very quickly. And the reason right now this is getting so much attention is because this investment in AI is now surpassing $1 trillion globally. Like, between startups, between companies spending money, governments spending money, data centers, real estate, infrastructure, it's an enormous ecosystem that's happening. So if you're wondering, like, hey, this will just go away, there's just way too much money involved at this point. This is, not going to go away anytime soon. In the same way that people thought social media would go away, they thought that, well, the internet's passing, there's no real business in this. The dollar amounts are just astronomical. But in all fairness, I would say there is real return for your organizations and how you create impact. So let's talk about this question though about why AI projects fail. So experience organization, you might realize actually are the same issue across the board. Technology we're applying to. I think the one that stands out for me is lack of problem focus. This is where you want to stay away from is, and it's similar to unmanaged experimentation, is like not really knowing the initial problem that you're trying to solve. Like that problem being defined really well becomes really critical. And most folks don't see how to do that. Like there's